I'm sure most of you know me, and for those who don't, I'm Abby Arendt. 4th through 7th graders, raise your hand if in your 8th grade you'll want to do a mini mommy. Okay, you can figure this out. When I was in the younger grades, my hand would have been straight up. When I was in 5th grade, I remember hearing the 8th graders speak on Zoom, and I always thought they were so cool and grown up. I was so excited for it to finally be my time. I would fantasize about all the cool stuff I would do in the older grades, and how I would talk about it to the younger kids, hoping to inspire all of them as much as I was inspired when I was their age. Now, raise your hand if you already have some sort of idea of what you want to talk about in your mini mommy. Okay, so for those of you who didn't raise your hands, I can definitely relate. Sadly, as time went by, I was nowhere close to being able to raise my hand for that question. I continued to look forward to the Anima meets every week, but I never actually knew what I was going to speak about for mine. I never really thought about it too much and just said, oh, I'll figure it out when it's time. Well, I made it to 8th grade. I signed up for my Maamina, and I still had no idea what to talk about. I just kept putting it off and just assumed I'd figure it out eventually. More time went by, and all of a sudden I realized there were only a couple of weeks left until it was my turn to speak. I first thought about writing about my experience on my soccer team last year, when I felt like an outsider on a team of girls who were already friends, with a coach who didn't believe in me and really destroyed my confidence. But then I started to think that this soccer experience wasn't anything special, and that it wasn't a big enough moment with a big enough lesson to satisfy my vision of the perfect speech. I decided to scratch that idea and think about something else that made me special and that made me stand out from everyone else. Then I thought I should write about my many ankle injuries. I'm sure you all have seen me crushing around the hallways at some point because I've had 3 ankle injuries in the last 4 years. I was worried about people making comments or thinking I was speaking it, so I thought I could speak about overcoming not just physical injuries, but also the stress related to being injured. Even though this was very important to me at the time, I decided that it still didn't live up to my expectations and that it wouldn't be as inspirational as I hoped it would be. I kept brainstorming, and I thought about how I put myself out there and worked hard to be on student council, about going to high school, about my family, about being obsessed with the movie Titanic, about all the school sports I played, literally anything worth talking about. But I couldn't think of a single thing that I thought was good enough. I started to have this negative mindset that I was boring and that there was nothing about me that differentiated me from everyone else. Along with this pessimistic attitude, I was still really struggling with actually writing my speech. My time for my Maamina was nearing, and I started to get really stressed out. Then I realized the reason I was struggling so much was because I'm a perfectionist. Even when I was in the lower school, I always had the mindset that if I didn't do something at my complete best or I didn't do it perfectly, that it would be embarrassing and I would let myself or someone else down. As I was struggling to think of something to talk about in my speech, the stress of it having to be perfect started to get to me because I had been dreaming about this speech for years, and now it wasn't going to be what I had envisioned. Then it hit me. I had been so focused on making my speech perfect that I didn't realize that the topic for my Maamina that I had been searching for this whole time was right in front of me. I could talk about my struggle with writing this speech, because lessons about being a perfectionist was something my younger self really needed to hear. It also seemed like a problem that other instructor students could really relate to. I started to write down my process of trying to write this speech and my struggle. And as I was looking back, I realized that my anxiety about not being different from everyone else was silly, because there's no other Abby Aronson who has the same soccer experience, has had 3 injured ankles, is on student council, loves Titanic, and more. Every little detail about me is what makes me me, and I'm not defined by one moment or one thing I love. I took this lesson, and it helped me to also realize that even if my speech wasn't perfect, or anything like what I had expected, not doing something perfectly doesn't define me either. It won't change anyone's opinion about me, and it definitely won't change my opinion about myself. Even if I'm not perfect, I'm still unique and me. I finally wrote my speech about not having a speech. I was very proud of myself because I was finally able to write something that's meaningful to me, true to my experience, and offers an important lesson to others that I wish I had learned when I was a younger student envisioning this very day. Now, after years of fantasizing and waiting, I can finally say, Maamina, I believe that you don't need to go searching for something that makes you different from everyone else. No one is defined by one thing. Every little thing about a person is what makes them who they are, and that's good enough, even if it isn't